We were back with more NBA coverage, and in this one, I will be covering all the Game 2 action for the conference finals round of the 2025-26 playoff campaign. Man, coming off of those thrilling Game 1s, both of them going into overtime, Spurs and Thunder going into double overtime, it was going to be imperative to see how these teams would figure out creative and routine ways and some effects to counteract what other teams have done up to this point and try to respond. When you're playing a game for that much time, that wear and tear can build up, and not having as much time to rest and recover afterwards can end up costing teams on some occasions. So how exactly would that be solved in a way? It's inevitable. You're going to feel it overall. But can you outlast it to try to string together that momentum in the next game and others to follow? Well, for this Spurs and Thunder one, to get straight into it, really, especially in the first quarter and even the second, they opted to kind of play their starters and spot minutes here and there. Like, there were moments on the court where you'd have SGA and Wemby and those guys, the starting lineups would tip off the game. But within, about 3 minutes or so, you'd have a lineup where Wembanyama's off the floor and SGA staying in to still get hot. And then SGA would go out 4 guys like Cason Wallace, the Alex Carusos, the Jared McCains of the world, just trying to really play this game of chess within the actual game itself to align your lineups in proper conformity with that of the other team that you're facing off against here. And that notion is respectable, right? It's strategic in a way. You are actively trying to set the tone, but you also want to make sure that, hey, your starting players with a couple playing more than 50, as Devin Vassell and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander both did in terms of minutes in Game 1, you want him to start off hot, which he did struggle with in the first game. You also want to make sure that if this is another closely contested battle, which more than likely it could be, you wanted to keep him as fresh in energy with the same kind of strategy here. So that was how these teams attacked it. Now, with the way the game started, you wouldn't be able to tell, because in all honesty, they picked up right where they left off. And it came through the most unorthodox of ways. As I mentioned, SGA and Jalen Williams, for that matter, in the first quarter, they were getting right into the mid-range spots. And I was watching different things about it, and people were saying that, hey, maybe they will look to exploit those areas a little bit more because of them being highly accurate in that range, and the fact that, hey, if you're not getting that close to Wembanyama, if you're drawing him out of the paint, or you have enough space in between him and the painted area, getting up a quick shot like that from that area of the floor is going to be the most beneficial to you. And man, they were just pure over and over and over again, knocking them down so early. So to see them set the tone like that was very important. And if they could keep that going, well, the Thunder's odds of winning this game were going to be pretty high. It also helped that, again, the younger players, the Mitchells of the world, when he got in the game, they were aggressive. They got him more involved in the offense, and he had a much cleaner shooting stretch there. McCain was hitting timely shots around this point, and you also had Lucian Dort get them started with 7 points in the first quarter of his own. So even with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being the looming threat and having the obvious 2 in Williams step up and play, the threat, just as well as we've said about the Spurs numerous times, when you have that many different hands getting touches on the ball and creating these high quality shots off of them, there isn't a lot that you can do outside of hoping that they may miss. And to start out this game, they were of the mindset that early on, we're just going to continue to attack this team in our own creative ways. Yes, Wembanyama is going to hold down the paint, but that doesn't mean we should be scared of taking all those shots that we can generate within the flow of our offense. So that was everything for the Thunder, and it got them on a pretty decent run here. What also helped is that the Spurs, they were right there with them, but it was a lot of the other players being forced to step up and contribute. Stephon Castle, of course, was still, along with Harper, getting the start for De'Aaron Fox, who was still out for this particular game, and he was forced to be the aggressor a little bit early on. Now, was it working? Sure. The Spurs, even with the Thunder pulling this off, they were still going score for score with this team, it felt like, for minutes on end. So they were very much right in the game themselves. And you also had Keldon Johnson and even Jordan McLaughlin later in the quarter step in and hit some quality shots. The way in which McLaughlin was hitting these three-pointers, I'm like, the man hasn't even played all that much. So that shit right there is just crazy to see. But I digress. Whatever they talked about before the game, they were coming out with a different form of energy here. Because even with the Spurs pulling this off, you love to see them finding that effort from other players. Of course, coming after that monster game, there was going to be a lot of focus on Wembanyama. And they had something very interesting for that. Instead of giving him what he wanted, which I thought was going to be the case in this game, and lining Chet Holmgren up against him more often than not, instead they opted for Isaiah Hartenstein to do it. And honestly, when you look at the output he had by the overall game in the end of the halves, honestly, he kind of did what he needed to do, at least on paper. You did not hear a lot from Victor Wembanyama in the first half. It's not to say that his presence was completely nullified on the court, because you still had these players running away from him at every single turn. But with this game tied up 31-31 after the first, he'd only accounted for a small amount of field goals attempted total, and he had 3 points at this time. Not necessarily the best display of his overall talent by even his standards in this short start to his career. But Hartenstein, even with his lack of mobility, which I didn't think would match well against Wembanyama, he used his physicality and strength to his advantage. Because he has a lot of size on him and a good amount of pounds on Victor Wembanyama. So he made the most of that opportunity. Now, was it always effective? No. In fact, it would be cited at multiple times that, and even showcased on the game film itself, the man was aggressively grabbing him. A lot. They weren't calling it. They weren't letting it rock. And as this continued to pile up, it just kept Victor Wembanyama out of rhythm. On the offensive end, on the glass, as although he would still go on to pull down some monster boards, the effect of doing so was at least balanced out by Hartenstein's own aggressiveness on the glass. So that was big time early for them, and often throughout this game. But you get into the second quarter, and you are still, again, at this point, tied up completely. The Spurs and Thunder are both teams that thrive, and I mean thrive heavily, off of forcing points off of turnovers and getting out and running in transition. And that is exactly where the contributions in the second quarter were made up, specifically by the Thunder. Because I don't know what is up with Stephon Castle specifically in some of these cases, but it seeped into the rest of the team as well. Like the rate of turnovers that took place here and the style in which they happened, the manner in which they happened, just made no sense because he was still being reckless with the basketball. Even the most simple handle assignments were just easy opportunities to generate steals for this Thunder team. And that added up to start the second quarter. They went on a 12-4 run instantly, without fail. And it's just like when you have that kind of dynamic going on, because the Spurs were still scoring, both of these teams were shooting at an elite, and I mean elite level. The percentages were off the fucking roof in this game. But you're taking away all those possessions from yourself, and the Thunder are making you pay on the other end that relentlessly, and you don't have an answer for it. If they continued to let it pile up, it was going to become a problem. And very slowly it got that way. Again, even as the Thunder were seemingly pulling away each and every single time in this game, and that'll be a theme of this as well, the Spurs had themselves a few answers. Now again, you look at this particular moment in the second quarter and you're saying to yourself, does the impact of it even matter with Stephon Castle literally giving the ball away on the other end as all of this chaos is unfolding? And free points for the Thunder. Like, that just shows you right there. Even when things were going well for the Spurs team, it just felt like they were getting in their own way. Because the play before that was heard all over the fucking landscape of the NBA. When I say that Stephon Castle punched it on Hartenstein, he punched the living shit out of Hartenstein, bro. That man leapt off 2 feet, got high up in the air on the drive after this kick out, and stepped into the lane. And he boomed it on Hartenstein. The shit was nasty, man. Cocked his arm back and just slammed it right into the rim. That was a filthy dunk. And he had to give a little stare down after that. And then again, you are in that moment, you're free to talk your shit. Because, man, it was fucking crazy. Then they give up 5 straight points. With the aforementioned turnover. Like, just the little things like that. You have to keep your head within the flow of the game. And at moments, it just felt like the Spurs completely lost that sense at times. Very, very unfortunate for them. The Thunder were still going to take advantage, though. And it helped even more so with Wembanyama not being as effective. Then you're subbing him out. And instantly, the mindset is to continue to roll to the rim, which Chet Holmgren was able to for an and one at this time. And Shea would not stop. He just kept on with those signature mid-range pull-up shots, getting all the bumps he was looking for, rising up and firing without much of a contest. It's just too good of a shot. And at that point, the Thunder looked as though they were catching a little bit of steam. Because now they had an 11-point lead in this game. Slowly, again, just eating away at the Spurs team with timely possessions and then even extra possessions out in transition. The Spurs, again, they were still shooting great, but every possession means something in this time of playoff season. So you have to do something way more consistently than that. And that something would be to, over time, just protect the ball, hold on to the ball. Even when I'm saying that, it's not even like they could do it for long enough. But I digress. Ultimately, by the end of the first half, the Thunder held a 62-51 lead as A.J. Mitchell would once again give them another timely bucket to close out the quarter and prevent them from decreasing the lead to double digits by the end of them, maybe providing them with a little extra momentum here. And so far, the response effort was so good for the Thunder. It typically is. There was a mention that essentially in the last couple postseasons, whenever they had faced a loss in the playoffs, they'd been undefeated in the games immediately following them. So, that was kind of the thing. entering this game was that, yes, in ways you don't want to fall down 0-2, but you've seen enough from this team in this core that you trust that they can go get one back, even after a devastating loss like that in game one. It would get tricky, though, for both teams. Because, again, as I mentioned, one way to mitigate that was through trying to, make those substitutions in game. And I don't know if this could be chalked up to, having that wear and tear pile up over time, or dealing with pre-existing injuries and potentially having them re-aggravated. But no matter how you slice it, both teams, by the end of this third quarter, would be down some valuable players. You have to look at the Thunder first, as they did not start the second half with J-Dub. In fact, he'd finished the game with just 7 minutes played total. They checked him back in the locker room, and for a while he didn't hear anything. He was still sitting out, and so that would have to be monitored throughout this game. But they had bigger problems to worry about on the court, because instantly they allowed the Spurs to go on a 12-4 run, and not only that, Isaiah Hartenstein early was at 4 fouls, despite trying his hardest to bait Wemby into a couple in the first half that were actually challenged and overturned, which would be pretty important later. Especially with some of the things that might have been going on at the time. But I digress. Hartenstein himself was at 4 fouls in the early third quarter. And it was bad timing too. Wembanyama was starting to heat up, and this team was starting to find a little bit of rhythm. Now again, you love to see Hartenstein get playing time, valuable playing time, and do his best to limit Wembanyama after what happened. And some of the grabbing that was taking place, again, like, it's the playoffs, they're going to allow a little bit of that. But there's a difference between retaining that in a disciplined way on the court and then being just completely over-aggressive. And at times, that's where Hartenstein found himself. He literally could not play the rest of the third quarter as a result of that. And considering what had been done to Wembanyama at that point, it's just a completely missed opportunity. Before you knew it, the Spurs, with him, literally on one occasion, grabbing a rebound, going back out to the three-point line after thinking that the play was stopped with the whistle, and pulling up from fucking deep again. But they damn near took a lead in this at this time. They tied up the ball game, and everything from there was seemingly on the right path for the Spurs team. They were more than in the mode now, and they were starting to, come out in the second half, keeping possessions set, not really worrying too much about overcomplicating these passes, just making fundamental reads and getting their guys in the right spots. And that proved to be huge for the Spurs team. They had to rotate. They were still trying to double Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and so he was forced on several occasions to kick the ball out and have it swing around to open shooters, which they found over and over and over again. And a lot of them, including this one from Caruso, a later one from McCain to end the quarter, it was Wembanyama who was late to the contest. And they scored these shots right over him. In fact, Alex Caruso, at multiple points in this game, was able to do that. Now again, Wembanyama is going to roam all over the place. But my thinking was that maybe they try to put a guard or a wing on Alex Caruso or any of these guys just to watch him. Because it's not that Wembanyama is a bad defender, but you obviously are trying to keep him down low. And all that does is strategically draw him outside of the paint, which the Thunder were able to use to their advantage. You wouldn't be able to tell it by the overall metric. But another thing that did help the Thunder in this one was that, hey, when those kinds of things would happen, if shots were missed, they were actually able to bring down some boards even when Wembanyama was slightly in position to go get them, they had enough concentration around him to swarm those bodies and get at least a rebound to reset a possession or start up a different one. Now, were they desperate for it? Yes. There were a couple occasions where they actually gave a triple box out to him. But you still have to do what you have to do. He was still grabbing his own boards. He'd still pull down some pretty good ones, especially later in the game, with one hand through contact that, probably should have been called, but I digress. And both teams would have to deal with that. I'll expand on that later, but, even with some of the calls that were missed, the game was evenly called. So, you can't necessarily say too much about that. The real difference lied in the turnovers. Because once again, even with this being a 4-point ball game, the sporadic nature of them just continued to put this Spurs team far behind the 8 ball. And then more disaster happened for the Spurs, at least seemingly. Because Dylan Harper, again, you go back to game 1, he'd given you a solid performance, and he was still putting together a solid outing in this second matchup. He was going for a rebound, and he hit the leg of Chet Holmgren and hyperextended a lower region of his leg. They'd rule it an adductor injury, as they had on the ticker, and so reported in the fourth quarter by the sideline reporters for NBC, he'd be out for the rest of the game after that injury. Now, this happened with about 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and again, in most situations, this may not be as big of a deal, but again, with them already down Fox, with Harper being that large of a contributor and now being out of this game, you had an uphill battle to climb here. And that, in a way, would put even more pressure on Stephon Castle to handle the basketball, which does get lost in the equation. Yes, you can see the numbers and recognize that, the amount of turnovers he's accrued over the first 2 games, they are a lot. In fact, they are the most by any player in a 2-game span in the playoffs ever. That's not a good thing. Certainly not, but when you look at the injury situation right now, it's kind of hard to rely on anybody else to really get that done for them, outside of maybe Jordan McLaughlin. And even then, well, we know who McLaughlin is. Nevertheless, the Thunder could not worry about that. They had to continue getting into everything on their end. Chet Holmgren would actually put together a brief run, going for 5 points in this time span, and showing a little bit of emotion himself, getting a highlight dunk before they called a timeout while facing a 10-point deficit at the time. The Spurs were trying to close out the third quarter fairly well, and granted they did. With 54 seconds left, Vassell just rising up and firing with his pure 3-point shot as well. Crazy to think that he was drafted later than Patrick Williams was, both of them being from Florida State, both of them in the same 2020 draft, and these are the kinds of things that Vassell is doing compared to whatever the hell that Patrick Williams is doing. Yet they wanted to label him as a better 3-and-D prospect. Sure, then watch Vassell make that shot and bring this game within a reasonable deficit. Still, the Thunder as well were able to close out this quarter the right way, with Jared McCain again hitting it over Wembanyama of all people and getting in another great 3-point shot to close it out and take an 8-point lead at the end of the third. You get into the fourth quarter and more of the same continued. Now, you may call it luck from Jared McCain. It had to, clank all the way in, touch every single part of the rim, but he got it done once again. And that's still before you even get to Alex Caruso continuing to be a great 3-point shooter in this game for this team. Now with other guys stepping up and rising to that level of play, it just made things even more dangerous for the Spurs team. And so they were going to have to be careful about, again, contesting those shots, getting those rebounds, and also protecting the ball. For the most part, they failed to do all three of those things. Even with taking that lead, and even when you had Harrison Barnes nearly tie the game up, get the game within 2, the Spurs still continue to just give away looks, and they got a little undisciplined. Now, again, some of these foul calls were bogus, but some of them were very much controllable on the part of the Spurs. And regardless of what you may say about it, it hurt that they were in this position, and the Thunder were already nearing the bonus at this point of time. So that was going to be problematic. You not only have to play the game itself, you've also got to play without fouling, or at least do your best to. And so you're overcomplicating it, thinking about both of those things at the same time. And whatever the case might have been with that, more open looks just got created for this team. Like Wallace and McCain hit 3-pointers back-to-back following that specific play. And it just continued over and over and over again. Spilled over into a 9-0 run. And then 10-0 with Isaiah Hartenstein, of all people, making both of them. And ultimately, the league got up to as large as 13 in just a matter of a couple minutes. As the shots also just cratered off a little bit for San Antonio in general. The worst possible thing they could have asked for there, but still there were more than 6 minutes left in the game. They had enough time to potentially pose a comeback. And if not for some of the more improbable three-point makes you'll ever see, it wasn't possible. It did not necessarily read like a clutch time game, but the Spurs had this never-say-die attitude about themselves. Even with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander trying his best to close out the game, it was Devin Vassell hitting an impossible three-point shot. I mean impossible. He had to go so high up on the rise just to get it up, and then ends up making it. Keldon Johnson had to literally launch it from so fucking deep in the corner, and he was fading back damn near, and he still greened it, showing his capabilities as a 6-man of the year winner like he was this season. And it just continued with this crazy ass shot making from the Spurs team down the stretch. They could not get a stop for enough time. And that is exactly where the Thunder wanted them. That is exactly how the Thunder had been playing this all game long. And the second that Shai got settled down in this time, it was over for them. And in fact, once he got this same look as the game 1 regulation tying shot, he gets right into the lane, pulls it back on Stephon Castle, creates enough space, and rises up and fires for a textbook dagger of his kind. Then was apparently telling Jared McCain, and hey, you can say that he was directing it to him, but also a general message to, all the critics out there saying that this was a must-win game for the Thunder. Hey, calm the fuck down as he looks intuitively elsewhere after the shot. That's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a nutshell. And it is inevitable when he has it going like that. They needed it. And ultimately, that is what would lead this Thunder team to a 122-113 win on Wednesday night. This Thunder team, they did have disadvantages in terms of shooting percentage. But again, on the margins, they handled a lot of different responsibilities that ultimately made the difference in this one. Especially in the second half, the offensive rebounds, even with it just being separated by 1 over the overall game, they felt as though they were crashing the glass a lot better in the second half. They forced 21 turnovers and got 27 points off of them compared to just 10 for the Spurs, which is a no-no, with them both wanting to play that way, and those being strengths for the both of them. You can't have that large of a disparity in amount like that. That is insane. And it just gave this Thunder team room to at least always be up in situations like this. They did not want the Spurs to get that much control. All of those runs that were taking place saw the Thunder playing with pretty much a good hand of their own, while the Spurs were constantly playing from behind. This Thunder team is too good to just give that away. And they got close. They got close. That's how good the Spurs are, even with those turnovers in mind. But it just overwhelmed them to a point of no return. For the numbers, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 30 points and 9 assists along with 2 blocks and a steal and a single turnover on total 24 shooting. But it was everybody else. The bench scoring was elite as they combined for 57 points with 4 different players, led by Alex Caruso going for 17, scoring more than double digits. And all of them off the bench. Especially Wallace and McCain hitting multiple three-pointers in this one. At least 3 or more. Then Mitchell himself had 10 points off the bench, and Hartenstein, again, 4 fouls by that point is a lot, especially after the third quarter, but he kept himself in the game, and he did have 10 points and 13 rebounds. So again, by, the numbers here, it won't necessarily display it, and they will definitely dissect the things he got away with in this one, including also literally yanking the hell out of Stephon Castles' hair, which should have been a foul. And if not, if they still had a challenge at that point, that was probably something that they could have challenged, I would think. Because that one out of most of the others is kind of egregious. Like, yes, the NFL has a thing where it's like, oh, they consider the hair a part of the jersey, and so that's legal. No. The way you see Stephon Castles' neck roll back with the same motion, like that is a legitimately dirty play. But Hartenstein, if they were going to allow him to stay in the game, he did do his job in at least slowing Wembanyama down, at least keeping him from being such a pest on the glass and not being able to get in the same offensive rhythm, even with a stronger second half overall. Jay Holmgren also had 13 points and 4 rebounds on 5 of 10 shooting as well. Did not make a single three, but ultimately that did not matter. Kind of shocking to see that McCain took 14 shots in this game. But no, in all seriousness, they responded as perfectly as they could have. This is just what they do at this point. And so now again, it is about carrying that over into the next one. They have listed J-Dub as day-to-day at this point. It was a re-aggravation of his hamstring injury, unfortunately. So the jury will still be out at that time on what exactly that will look like. We have no idea. It's very tough to see that. But at the same time, if you're going to have your guys get these minutes in place of him and play extremely well, then ultimately it may not matter all that much, at least right now, as it stands. But if, certain things happen with this series going on, Jalen Williams is obviously a important piece to have. And so you will want to see whether or not he's healthy, at least in the next few days or so, with this still going on. But we'll ultimately have to find out. And they will have to adjust accordingly depending on what happens. Those turnovers, man, they just swarm after people. And they continue to, at such an elite level, jump all the passing lanes that they may be expecting, and it's like they're 2 steps ahead. They're literally seeing where the pass is going. They've seen this story 1,000 times. They know where the ball is headed before the Spurs even recognize what they're doing with the ball. So using that basketball IQ to your advantage is also essential for them. And it culminated in, again, a great game number 2 for them and what they try to instill in their team. As for the Spurs, to that same point, like even as they were making that run, and even as it got potentially close, because on one occasion, late in this fourth quarter, the game is being trimmed down in terms of deficit, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is quite literally coming off of an offensive foul that they actually called, forcing a turnover. Everything else breaks down on this possession after Vassell, who had gone 6 of 12 from 3, by the way. Pretty great night from that standpoint of perimeter shooting. He missed this one, and they get the ball back. So the goal ultimately is to reset, only Stephon Castle, in an attempt to get it to Julian Champagnie, the ball just rolls so far away from Champagnie, and the pass is poorly placed to where he has no chance of getting it, and it's an automatic turnover. So again, yet another close part of this contest here being wasted away with just turnover after turnover. Stephon Castle, as I mentioned, had 9, accounting for the most in a 2-game span in playoff history with 20. And he is still on pace for the most by a single player in a series in NBA playoff history. Again, not good metrics to have here. To the plus side of things for Castle in this one, aside from trying to improve on that in Game 3, even with him having a hell of a burden to carry here, as a 21-year-old guard for a potentially championship-bound team, Castle did have 25 points and 8 assists in this game on far more accurate shooting compared to Game 1, where he was 5 of 14. Shot 10 of 17 from the field in this game. And he was getting to the rim at will. For him to be a combo guard of sorts that might not be regarded as the best ball handler, that might not be known as the best three-point shooter, even though I'd heard something saying that he was like 40+% from deep since February. So that's fucking crazy. Try that on, right? Even with that being the case, he can still get to the rim at will like that and shoot essentially inside the painted area, because he had a couple mid-range shots too. But shooting at least somewhere in the ballpark of 70 to 80% inside the paint at his size as a smaller guard is just crazy to think about. And that's what the Spurs want on their end. They want to force that high percentage look down low all the time. They just did not consistently get it from the player in which could have potentially the largest, no pun intended, impact on the series. Victor Wembanyama still had, in terms of a stat stuffer game, it still does fit that requirement. 21 points, 17 rebounds, 6 assists, a steal, and 4 blocks in this game are all things that still would jump off the page at you. He shot 8 of 16 from the field in this game as well, so he was highly accurate. But the key lies in how he got those points. He had to take 7 3-pointers to get there. Did make 3 of them. He can hit those shits. But the the Thunder would much rather have him take those shots outside of the rim than just continue to bully them in the paint. And it happened again. It wasn't perfect. It happened on numerous occasions, including him literally putting back multiple of his own misses and dunking on Jared McCain, trying to contest one of those and pull down a rebound somehow, which just like, poor guy, he did not want that at all. That's just the Wembanyama effect. And it's limiting those kinds of things that would make this game compared to the first one, seem more human. Now you have yourself an even playing field, at least on the offensive end, and the Thunder trust that, hey, their guys against these other wings can get the job done, with that X factor being at least somewhat limited in what he can produce on the floor. And to their point, using those challenges early, forcing the Spurs to have to do so, made them take away the focus from all else that was happening in the game. Even if some of the flopping is a little unforgivable. They had no ammo to use there. So from that standpoint, that was also another area where it's like, hey, you use them, you lose them. And it came back to bite the Spurs, unfortunately. But there will probably be some counters to this heading into the game tonight, I'd have to imagine. Because, yeah, a lot of those shits are fouls, and a lot of those flops as well, potentially on both ends, should be, again, by the rule book that they have updated, and by the rule that they initiated on the flopping in the first place. If they'd ever enforce it, it'd be a technical foul. So I don't know why they don't enforce it. I guess that's not up to me to really, like, that's just wild. Why the hell do you have the rule if you ain't going to use it at all? Like, that makes no sense to me. But I digress. And then, overall, like, again, they were pretty accurate themselves. Both teams were. The Spurs shot 48.8% from the field in this game and shot 40% from three. In most universes, in most contexts, they would have probably won the game. But you can't not have a disparity of 12 turnovers and expect to come out on top. It just does not happen to even the best playoff teams out there. You just can't allow something like that. And the Spurs will have to mitigate, at least making that battle a little bit closer, a little more evened out. Or otherwise, they will continue to find themselves in this situation. They scraped by in game one, but that is not a sustainable route and pathway to success in order to reach the NBA Finals, let alone win one. Now, it could be growing pains as well, and so they'll be looking to see if they can get De'Aaron Fox back, because that would help immensely in a way, as a guy who, again, is a clutch player of the year. He could directly rival SG in those moments where you may need a timely bucket down the stretch of a ball game. And, again, a steady hand who does at least have some playoff experience and will at least control himself in a much better fashion as a guard who is not necessarily old, but he's obviously a seasoned veteran. He's like 28 years old, and you are trusting that compared to guys in Harper and Castle who should literally still be in college in a perfect world. So they'll look to monitor that, but if they aren't, they may have to do a by committee system in terms of handling the ball, at least getting up the court. And then in a half-court setting, you're going to have to get creative. Maybe just, again, not always force Castle to be the primary ball handler. Keep swinging the ball around. Keep the defense on ice in terms of who's threatening with a handle. Just don't put as much pressure and as much of a burden on your young guy like that. They'll have to figure that out. But it was a very good win for the Thunder in a fashion in which they typically respond well to. It's going to be a very interesting game 3 later on tonight. Moving on to the Knicks and the Cavs, and of course, knowing what we knew about the last game, you understood that it was still going to be packed out in MSG and outside, to where you still have multiple taxis lined all the way up in traffic as a result of this large and crazy-ass fan base getting their asses down there for the game. We knew that already. The Knicks were very much riding high, understanding still that they needed to do a little more to ensure that they could win without much trouble at all. It was very close to going down that way. Luckily for them, they had a clutch performance from Brunson and the rest of the team in the last game, a 44-11 run to close it out. Now, would anything like that happen again? On the Cavs end, they needed to make sure that they, as I was alluding to before ending off the last video, they could not allow a lead of that nature to take place again. Because, as I said, if it got to that point, the Knicks would do their very best to hold on to it and win the game outright. They needed to set the tone early. And even Kenny Atkinson himself was mic'd up to show that I'm not crazy. I said this as well, not even being a hardcore basketball guy compared to the NFL. He said some of the exact same stuff I was noting down. You have got to start off hot in the first few minutes. We are not going out like that again. Gotta send that message somehow, in some way, and it starts early. They want us to come out and be demoralized. They want Harden to come out and be demoralized at what he did and allowed in the last game. We can't give it to him. We need to pull all the punches out and force this team to submit early. That's what we have to do. I shit you not. Because I'm like, dude, let's see what they got. Then you get into the first two possessions of the game. And they set off ball screens for Jalen Brunson, and he rotates around, drawing the matchup between he and James Harden, and he takes him right to the paint for a floater over him. And then again, they draw up another play with Karl-Anthony Towns essentially popping back for a three-pointer with James Harden on the direct matchup against him, and he splashes it in his face. So you're telling me, essentially, you didn't learn a goddamn thing. You didn't learn a goddamn thing over the past couple of days. How is it that we say these things in the locker room, and we're talking about getting a hot start, and here you are with Harden being on the receiving end of the first 5 fucking points from this Knicks team in this game? No bullshit. You cannot make that up. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no way that they're still continuing this trend now. But okay, had to dial it back a little bit. This is all in just the first 35 seconds. You know, there's still room for the Cavs to make something happen here. Which, over time, they did. Offensively, they really got a lot of great work from Evan Mobley to start this one out. Of course, he is that caliber of versatile player who can give you award-winning caliber defense and very good offense, especially when he can both stretch the floor and also give you that unrelenting presence in the paint. You didn't always see it from him, though. And so, there were a couple of possessions where, he's spacing out and hitting those three-point shots. And that was going to be important for the Cavs team as a whole. Because, again, they started off very well. They cooled down completely in the second half and allowed the Knicks to come back that way. But they were still on the money, and they got themselves a 13-4 run, with Harden also contributing to a deep three himself, trying to establish a little bit of a get-back rhythm over everyone else outside of Jalen Brunson, rather. So that was a great turnaround for the Cavs instantly. And to have that happen in that moment does show, from the Cavs' perspective, that, hey, at least we're still going out, we're still trusting our guys, and we're creating some great looks for ourselves. They were going to have to keep that momentum going for the rest of the game. All of that being said, Donovan Mitchell himself was kind of out of it. He was not, once again, driving as well to the rim, and even in other situations, there was a play where they just set such a high screen, and they attempt to double team him. Anyways, So I guess the Knicks were just content at that time with not allowing Donovan Mitchell to really get a full head of steam at all to start this game. But still, the big men were holding it down, and they had themselves a 17-11 lead. And also, I call bullshit. They're calling this a layup. Because with what I saw in real time, as Evan Mobley used all his quickness to get past the big and buff Mitchell Robinson, as he was guarding him there, cuts off the baseline and jams it in for a reverse dunk, not a layup. So I don't know what the hell they could possibly be talking about here. Like, we had to have been watching the same game, right? That man clean dunked that ball on Mitchell Robinson. Don't try to create some PR for him, you know what I'm saying? Don't do that shit. But, yeah, no, they got that going, and then everything just started to tail off a little bit, at least defensively. It was not Jalen Brunson, as they themselves were legitimately not trying to have him make as much of an impact on this game. And I'll elaborate on that even further. But it was everybody else. It was Mikal Bridges taking some very awkward looking, but clean fadeaways in the mid-range. It was Karl-Anthony Towns getting downhill and using his size to his advantage for a brief personal run here. And it was also Josh Hart at least beginning to make his presence felt as an interior scorer in this game. Juxtapose that with him not playing for the fourth quarter and overtime for a good portion of it, and you get a guy who honestly was just trying his best to shake back and do what needed to be done for the team to win the game. Ultimately, with that 13-5 run, they evened it up. Unfortunately, Donovan Mitchell, although he was quiet, when it comes to the final few seconds of an early quarter, and he has the ball in his hands and the team has possession, there isn't anything more automatic than a buzzer beater from him. And you'd get that again as he walked down Landry Shamet and stepped back on him for a three-pointer right in over his head to end off the quarter and give the Cavs, by all accounts, a good start. They had the 27-24 lead. They were 5 of 10 from deep in the first quarter alone. And, you know, even if they weren't truly getting those looks that they'd want to on the interior, if they were going to consistently hit shots like that, well, they gave themselves a great chance. That's how they'd been last season as well, when you consider how good their offense was and how great their perimeter shooting was last year, heading into the postseason. And you're getting the same trend here. They are just dynamic offensively and have the potential to be. It's just about, again, stringing that together over four quarters. And that would be the challenge entering this game. So far, so good for them. Still, they just slowly started to deteriorate on that front. See, even if the key was to limit Brunson in this game, it was still going to come down to those minutes where he was not on the floor. And you already had a plus with him not being effective while he was out there. So the Cavs, this was an opportunity for them to strike early in the second quarter to, at the very least, put themselves in good footing for the rest of the game. And instead, I mean, they had a mixed bag of results here, which is everything that the Knicks would want on their end. The goal was just to not get flat out kicked in their asses by this metric. And they did a good job of saving it off. They had a 7-2 run to open the second quarter. They were also playing some tight defense overall, even with the likes of Dennis Schroeder being able to big game hunt and go after Jalen Brunson for a change. If only they could enact that even further for the rest of the game, because it was working when Schroeder was able to do it, and you'd want to see that from Harden a little more. Give the people what they want to see, I guess. That didn't necessarily end up happening. But nonetheless, they were still very much in the contest overall. They could not get a hold of Karl-Anthony Towns either, with smaller players guarding him and starting to just get a feel for the game without needing to commit stupid fouls or stupid turnovers on his end. So that certainly helped the Knicks a lot. And at the very least, again, with Brunson being out, you're keeping this thing close. You're not allowing the Cavs to pull too far away here. A really big thing as well for the Cavs, I think this was something that Kenny Atkinson was alluding to during the timeout, because he also echoed the sentiment that, hey, Harden was certainly being hunted, but it's also about what we can do as a team to support our players out there. And there was just a struggle for minutes on end when the Cavs had possession for Harden to get the ball up the court, which typically, in his prime years, you're not expecting that from him. He's going to sauce pretty much any defender he goes up against. But even in those situations and with the best ball handlers out there, you are looking for some sort of help if the defense is committing to them in a way like the Knicks were. I mean, it was Mikal Bridges, if not for a defensive foul, he was going to commit his second 8-second violation of the quarter. And it got so bad, even Jordan Clarkson, yes, that Jordan Clarkson, was also forcing James Harden so deep into the backcourt. Now, ultimately, he was able to get past that one. But when you see that, as a coach, you're thinking, hey, can we just get one of our guys up here to set a screen to at least break James Harden free and help us to initiate our offense a little bit sooner than whatever the hell was taking place here? Because that just cannot happen. And it slowed the Cavs down a little bit from what they wanted to do. The shooting for the Cavs was the biggest thing, because they were still creating great looks on these dribble drives, on these cuts to the paint. But players, including the likes of Sam Merrill, would go scoreless trying to create those three-point shots. He did not hit a single one in the first half. And instead, he had to get down in space and put the ball on the floor, something he's rarely doing as a ball player in his situation. Strus couldn't really get them that consistently either. They just struggled as a team to really find it on the perimeter. And that is what allowed the Knicks to at least stay close in this one. It wasn't a mind-blowing offensive quarter in that regard, as both teams took at about the 5-minute mark to even reach 40 at this point of time. Plus, it did not help that the Knicks as well, they were much better about controlling the glass in this quarter. And that's how they typically won it, as a team who likes to grind things out. Maybe they're not going to make the first shot, but they guarantee themselves that, hey, with a second chance, with a third chance, with a fourth chance, it doesn't matter. They're going to get their own shot back, and they're going to get quality points out of it. So that was something to really take note of for the Knicks here, as they started to take the lead back and would ultimately end off the quarter with a 53-49 lead heading into the halfway mark. Also, it would be the start of some craziness, because that man Josh Hart was heating up, and he'd already had a good amount of points in the first half, but hey, nothing could prepare them for what was coming next. Meanwhile, for the Cavs in general, juxtaposing that with what Hart was doing, they themselves had a 1 of 11 shooting stretch in the second quarter from the three-point line. And while they were, again, competitive as ever, it was still a 4-point ball game, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but they needed to improve that if they wanted to win the game, flat out, against the Knicks team that has their own volume and accuracy from three well documented throughout the season. The one thing that they could hang their hat on is that Jalen Brunson was having a pretty bad scoring night by his standards. He was held, again, inefficient, and it wasn't even like he was getting a crazy amount of shots up in general. And when they were, they kept bodies around him to force those misses. He remained at just 2 points at the end of the half. And it looked as though especially on like a particular play, as they damn near forced a shot clock violation. He was trying to drive, and they incorporate this sort of zone coverage with 3 defenders in triangle formation, just cutting off any path for him to get into the lane, and he backed out of it. He passed out of the play. That was what they wanted to settle for. Let's turn Jalen Brunson into a damn passer, not one of the best scorers in the league and one of the most deadly forces in clutch time in the league. We're going to make him pass out of these shots. We're going to have everyone else beat us. And for a Tom, that could work. Only it did not help that you yourselves were also not hitting your shots. We could be having a completely different conversation if they did, but you want to at least, play off of that with great shooting on your end to blow this team out of the water. One thing could not lead to multiple good things in that specific sense. They just could not string it together for long enough. And then you get this third quarter. You're expecting the Cavs to start off as hot as any. And to their credit, getting into the lane, automatically putting pressure on the rim and having Jared Allen put in a nice close shot along with Donovan Mitchell doing his best efforts to slash to the rim and get yourself 4 points off the bat. Like, that's not bad at all. It's just that everything else afterwards was, yeah. Like I said, man, allowing runs of that nature against this Knicks team would just not be conducive to success. And everything else in this particular run was just ridiculous. Back-to-back turnovers, leading to easy transition buckets as the Cavs refused to get back and Jalen Brunson was just able to race all the way out to the rim with nobody in front of him at all. The amount of times Josh Hart, who again was not shooting well in game 1, which is why he was benched in the fourth quarter and overtime, he was tearing their asses up already from deep and continued that in this third quarter, and they still kept leaving him that wide open from the top of the key on multiple occasions from three-point range. Jalen Brunson was starting to get hot, very hot in this game as well, which is exactly what you didn't want from him as a scorer. And even when the Cavs had chances to get easy buckets, they missed it. They had chances at the free throw line on 4 different occasions, and they missed each and every single one of them. Each and every single one. It got to a point where before you could literally blink, with the game being tied at 53-all at the 10-minute, 37-second mark, by around the 5-minute, 35-second mark, they went on an 18-0 run. Before you could even blink, the Knicks were already starting to run them out of the fucking gym. And it got even worse in this same time frame. Because, again, I could feel it. The turnovers were piling up. They were not tracking players properly. Even Mikal Bridges on a different bucket. They just were not watching him at all, and he gets the most uncontested shot at the rim. You're not having James Harden be as aggressive on offense in this moment for whatever reason. And you also had Donovan Mitchell in foul trouble at this time, along with Max Strus being in foul trouble at this time. So not only were you already trailing by 18 at this time, you were almost running yourselves thin, considering that they have not consistently wanted to play some of their other bench guys, whether it be Tyrese Proctor, whether it be Jalen Tyson. They haven't done it much this series. And over the last few games in general in the playoffs. They might not have had a choice but to tap into doing it very soon with the way that these fouls were being called in this game. And with Mitchell still doing fine offensively, you couldn't risk having to take him out right now. It took Max Strus hitting this three-pointer for them to not only break the tension, but again, break a drought that I'm sure consisted of them missing over 10 straight threes. It was that drastic for this Cavs team. Still, they had the opportunities to chip back into it somewhat if only they tried to actually contest these shots. Like, everything was just easy. You had Karl-Anthony Towns, for crying out loud, get a fucking matchup right on James Harden. And what he proceeded to do? Put his little ass in the post, spin off of him, and drive into the lane. Because even if James Harden was a bender defender, I'm sorry, why are you putting a guard on Karl-Anthony Towns at the top of the key near the free throw line? That is just easy as it gets. And he's more than within his right to take advantage of that at that point. But it wouldn't stop there, as Karl-Anthony Towns is also able to just pull back, getting over to the corner, and fire up a very quick release from three to beat the buzzer and increase the lead to 16 at this time, which seemed to stay the course a little bit. And it was all just going poorly for the Cavs. I mean, hey, he might have Brunson still been under 10 points by this time, but again, with him having 7 points in the quarter, Josh Hart had 11 by himself, and Brunson also had a fair amount of assists in this quarter. It was just all starting to pile up for this Cavs team in the worst way imaginable. Now, luckily for them, they did finish off the quarter on a brief, and I mean a very brief note to close the quarter with a, again, brief surge just to cut the lead to 15. And it helped that Donovan Mitchell himself had 9 points in the quarter, but they were going to need more overall from everyone. Whether it be them hitting their shots, whether it be Harden or Mitchell being the aggressors, again, no room for excuses. Like, you needed to at least try to create room for yourself to win this ball game. And you'd already given it away in game one. You cannot afford anything of that kind to happen like that again. What did help the Cavs to start this fourth quarter is that, hey, not only did they go on an 8-1 run by forcing the aggression and cut the lead in the same fell swoop to single digits, they also got in the bonus very early, just drawing routine contact on defenders and getting easy shots at the line. And when you're trailing by 15 plus at any time, sometimes the best way to get yourself in rhythm is to get to the free throw line. Luckily for them, they were hitting them for the most part. And at least at this particular point in the fourth quarter, although they had been struggling overall in the second half, I will say that. But in this particular time, they were. And that meant everything for them. You slow the game down and you buy yourself a little more of an opportunity to create highly valuable scoring potential. So that was good for the Cavs in this. And aside from a crazy bailout three from Anunoby, their defense had largely started to tighten up, at least enough to make this uncomfortable for the Knicks, to show them that they weren't going down without a fight at the very least. Again, considering the nature of what happened in game one, that had to be exercised. There was just no room to leave that on the tape. You had to take that in mind. Because goodness gracious, if you were to allow that to carry over fully into the next one, you were going to be in an absolute disaster. And it was in perfect position for them. They were down by 8 at the 7-minute 46-second mark. Enough time, more than enough time, to take themselves a bit of a lead here and potentially make a surge in the same way that the Knicks were able to in game one. Until once more, they got sloppy. As I said, outside of that specific junction, they showed on the graphic that in the second half, the Cavs were actually 9 of 17 from the free throw line. And they missed a couple more here after allowing Mikal Bridges to put up the easiest floater he will ever have in his life. And OG Anunoby was able to bully his way right into the rim. And Mikal Bridges was then subsequently able to cash in a well-timed three-point shot in the corner with Jared Allen literally staring at whatever, out of position and late to the contest, not even anywhere near him at that time, to really alter the shot whatsoever. At every single point, that defense, as poor as we understood the Cavs defense was, they just continued to one-up themselves with laps after laps after laps in this fourth quarter. And just like that, you've extended the lead back to double digits again. So it wouldn't really end up reaching a clutch time scenario. But the Cavs were trying at least. Harden did get himself another three-pointer to push it back down to 10. But even in those moments, even with this not necessarily being a clutch time game, every single person in the building knew the second that he drew the matchup on Harden on the next possession, we knew where that ball was going. We knew exactly what he was going to do. And he proceeded to take him down to the paint on the block, give him a fucking shoulder bump that knocks him back. I'm going to use my lower body strength against you playing upright like that and playing that high. You gotta be lower than that because the low man wins. And Harden proceeded to again get taken out of his defensive stance, get knocked back at least a few inches, and Brunson, still remaining on his pivot, was able to get this shot up and make it cleanly. Torching his ass, still willingly seeking him out, still, maybe not to the same extent. But again, over the course of the whole game, hey, when it's there, when it's within the structure of our offense, if we have that matchup against you, we're still going to expose the shit out of you, and there is nothing you can do about it. And by that point, it was just a foregone conclusion that no matter what they tried to do, it was just inevitable. Like, they literally at times were showing throughout the game that they were just putting Harden so far out of the play and out of the formation away from the ball just to make sure that they would not try to hunt him on defense. And for a while, that was also something, and it's like, hey, you can look at the Cavs and suggest that, okay, if we're not giving them that matchup, then hey, we increase our odds of being able to get stops elsewhere and with other players. Maybe that much is true. Yet still, when it counted the most, they knew that they could rely on that. I will say that as things continued, there was no game planning for Josh Hart at multiple times in this game unloading some post moves that you would see from bigger forwards. Josh Hart stands at literally 6'4", and he's out here pirouetting around Jared Allen to the rack with ease. He just pulls out a fadeaway move on Donovan Mitchell down low for this one to go up 99-87 as he literally uses his one hand, his lone hand, to throw up a shot at the rim. And it goes. On a masterful night for him offensively. And it just kept on going for him. Y'all gonna keep daring the man to shoot. And granted, he was missing them in game one, but by the time we got to this point in the game, well, it's like, hey, look at him now. Look at him now. You're going to keep leaving open, he's going to make you pay for it. Ultimately, despite all their best efforts, the Knicks eventually went up 103-86 before Atkinson decided to call a timeout. And at that point, at that moment right there, with a 10-3 run, with Brunson having 10 points in the fourth quarter by himself, they'd gotten punched in the mouth again when they thought that the game was in reach. They did not close the deal, and they didn't even come remotely close to doing it, allowing this Knicks team to, once again, in the second half of the game, dominate and take control of everything. And ultimately, this Knicks team won 109-93 yesterday night, giving them their 9th straight playoff win, which is the most in their franchise history. And you also, in the same way, had them extend their record for the most overall point differential in any 8-game span in playoff history. At least entering this one, I'm sure that number got larger in this 9-game sample size. So all those things just piling up for the Knicks right now in the most positive of ways. It's insane to think about that. Genuinely. Like, in any way, shape, or form, no matter how you look at it, they are just running through these teams, and it's not even a joke. It's not even a joke. Goodness gracious. When you see a game go down that way, with them just completely turning it up a notch when they absolutely needed it. Although, again, I'm not going to call this series, and I'll expand on this point when I get to the Cavs side of things. But, man, the Knicks, again, as we've continued to see, they're just looking dangerous right now. And you have got to respect that. I mean, where do you even start? Like, this man, Karl-Anthony Towns, had 18 points and 13 boards in this game, along with a single assist. They still wanted to, again, force the pressure on Towns as well, not being able to, distribute those passes out of the post. But he still had a fairly good game, shooting 7 of 12 from the field and 3 of 5 from deep, while keeping the fouls a bit lower than he typically accrue over the course of a game. He was actually able to play and use that frame again to his advantage, even against the likes of Jared Allen or Evan Mobley. Like, there were multiple times in the first quarter, for example, he just takes Jared Allen straight to the rim himself and got an incredibly fortuitous bounce on one of those layups for the tough bucket as well. That aggression from Towns is something that could truly take this team over the top when it is calculated and not just completely done with reckless abandon. Mikal Bridges as well had 19 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists on 9 of 12 shooting with a single three-pointer. They mentioned that he, since that Game 5 performance, and that tough start to the Hawks series in general, from Game 6 of that Hawks series onward, Bridges has apparently shot greater than 70% from the field overall. What a turnaround from that respect. Because, again, everybody was on this man's ass and questioning why the hell they even traded for him in the first place. And he comes right back around, locks the hell in, and puts this on display while giving them great enough defense on his end by forcing Harden into those uncomfortable situations, bringing the ball up the court and things of that kind. Like, that was crazy to hear. And it's a long time coming for Bridges as well, as he tries to keep this momentum going as this team continues to try to win. This night was all about Josh Hart, though, as he, with his 26 points and 7 assists, along with 4 rebounds and 2 steals, set a career high for himself in the playoffs, with 26 points on 10 of 21 shooting and 5 threes. And he talked about it at multiple points after the game on SportsCenter and in the post-game with Lisa Salters as well, explaining that he wasn't necessarily, excited about being on the bench in those situations. He was a little disappointed in that. When he understood what came with the pursuit of victory there. And he understood that in this specific situation, his presence out there last game was not going to help them win. You come back from that, you bounce back from that, and you put together a performance like this where they have to start respecting your jumper at the very least, and very much pay the price for not doing so early enough. And then your presence from three ultimately allowed other people to get wide open looks from the same range. Talk your shit, Josh Hart. Absolutely. That's what it takes sometimes to be a selfless teammate. And Hart, since he's been in New York, even if it does help that the Nova boys are all there, outside of Ryan Arcidiacono, who again is not in the league anymore, that helps a lot. But he's retained that in pretty much every stop he's been in. And so there's no question why the Knicks fans out there love him. They were certainly chanting his name in this one. They wanted to make Jalen Brunson a passer, and players like Hart, players like Bridges, players like Anunoby, they were hitting their shots. They were hitting their shots. Way more than they can say for themselves. So, turning Brunson into a passer in this game, it might not have had the same impact as his scoring, but it still did more than enough to get the job done. He himself accounted for 14 assists and just 3 turnovers, while putting up 19 points still in this game. That is an insane assist-to-turnover ratio. And that's before we even get to the team. Because the biggest difference for me in this one, as well, and which I probably should have made more of a point about, the Knicks as a team had 32 total assists compared to just 6 turnovers. A greater than 5-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio for this Knicks team in this game. They were moving the ball around as effectively as you possibly can. And they were maximizing the potential that they could get on each and every single one of those shots. You know it's a great day at the office offensively when those 32 assists made up for essentially 32 of their 44 makes in this game. And they shot 51.8% from the field. If not for some other lapses, considering the discrepancy here in terms of accuracy, overall, this could have been an even worse game. Like, it's crazy to say that the Knicks may not have been playing their best basketball, and they are still mopping the floor with this Cavs team. Think about that for a second. By their standards, 51.8% shooting and 36.1% shooting from deep, even if, it's better than what the Cavs are doing over the run that they've had, they pale in comparison. And it's still more than enough to do irreversible damage to this Cavs team. So that shows you the mindset that the Knicks are carrying themselves with heading into these road matchups going back to Cleveland. And it is there where I say that, man, I don't know. As I'd already said, Game 1 was going to be the one you had to get. And it started out as well as it possibly could have for the Cleveland team. They came out with the answers. And yet still, whether it be through them still having a tired nature about themselves or just not really willing to put in as much effort, that can be debated in other areas. But what you see is what you get. They're down 0-2 once again in this series to an incredibly strong Knicks team who has playoff experience. And say what you want about the Pistons and their number 1 seed, maybe not having the same kind. With the way that the Knicks are playing, I would trust that they can actually close this out without having to worry about much of anything in the same way that Detroit did after the Cavs evened this series up and then took a 3-2 lead. I wouldn't see something like this happening with the Cavs here because they just have not shown enough. You have to be far more consistent than they have been. And this is what people have been echoing. The turnover issues. Being the most turnover-prone team in the playoffs has worked to their disadvantage. Having these shooting slumps to this extent have worked to their disadvantage. Do you know that they shot 4 of 25 from 3 after the first quarter overall in this game? 4 of 25 from 3. And then you compare that with how the numbers flipped for New York after the first quarter from the same range of the floor. As I've been saying about this Cavs team, they have to outscore. They have to outscore you in order to win. Their defense is not all that shit, aside from the likes of the big men holding it down. Because when push comes to shove, they're going to continue exposing all the guards. They will have their way with the wings. And they will keep going at Harden. They will live and die on that hill no matter what. And more often than not, they've been very much thriving off of those. The numbers actually came in from the last game, and they mentioned that they went 7 of 8 from the floor in that 44-11 run when they were targeting James Harden as the primary defender for 24 points. Not exactly 30 like I was brashly saying, but pretty close to that. And you can imagine that there was a similar output here. And other players around him, when you even get into the rotations or lack thereof from Allen on the 3 that I was talking about, it's like, where exactly is the energy? Where exactly is the firepower coming in for this team? You're just going to get outraced like that after one quarter? You're going to put all your energy into one quarter. And sure, how you started the game did matter in this one. But you have to play a full 48 minutes of basketball. And in terms of the outscoring, they could get away with that against a potentially weaker Raptors opponent. They could get away with that against a Pistons team that may not have had as much experience as most other established squads out there. This Knicks team is not playing that. They're not playing that shit. They have ran into an absolute juggernaut right now. And again, they have been more successful at home. They have. But as I said, the same thing about it in the Detroit series, and I ended up being wrong in a way. But seriously, what are you going to do? If you win these games on the road, and at home rather, the series is going to come back to New York in some fashion. And in both of these games in New York, you have let leads slip right through your fingers. And you've allowed this Knicks team to dominate you when it matters the most. How can I have any faith in you being able to upset this team in a potential 7-game series? Because it's going to come back to New York if they do win at least one of these games back at home. And then what? Seriously. Now again, this one in terms of that, I can't necessarily grill, Harden as much. Again, not scapegoating. Because in this one, his 18 points and 6 rebounds were okay at best. He had 3 3-pointers and shot 6 of 15 from the field. Not necessarily bad, but not necessarily enough to get you a win. They shot 9 of 35 overall in this game from 3-point range. And as a team themselves, they had just 11 assists. Turnovers were not a massive difference in this game. It was relatively clean from that respect. But again, on that massive run, you get at least half of them bunched up into just that small segment of time, which is crazy as shit. And you compare that assist-to-turnover ratio compared to that historically great and elite assist-to-turnover ratio from the Knicks in this one, you can't possibly last with that. If we're just going to keep being in scenarios where Harden is iso balling himself and ends up with just 2 assists. Like, I don't care about the fact that he didn't have a single turnover. We're not moving the ball around. In fact, on multiple occasions, everyone is just stalling out on these possessions because no one is moving off the ball. We're just, again, letting James Harden cook. We're going to live and die by our superstar player. We're going to let him cook and ride with him until the wheels fall off. Like, no. Not in this case. Because it took everybody else out of rhythm. And even with these guys still deferring, it wasn't as effective. Not even remotely. Like, think about this. Because I was watching the game as well. It was pointed out earlier that Evan Mobley attempted a single shot in the second half after the scoring output he had in the first quarter alone. After him going for 14 points in the first half, he had only 1 shot attempt period in the second half. How the hell does something like that even work? Even if you are trying to, again, get your other players going, which Donovan Mitchell was able to get 26 himself, I understand that. But at a point, like, you have to play through your hot hand as well. If the Knicks can entrust Josh Hart to do that in the third quarter, you can try to keep that momentum going with Evan Mobley in ways. And it also is on Evan Mobley too. There were multiple instances he is just literally passing out of these shots. And passing out of these looks that we know in a better, situation, he is more than capable of taking advantage of. I don't care how thin he might be in terms of his frame. Like, he has got the capability of being an offensive force. You have to use it in those situations. Because any pressure you are able to take off of them in terms of Mitchell and Harden does help you in a way. It does. They should be the initiators. But if they need help, then you have to consistently provide that. Or otherwise, it's just not going to work out. The bench depth was just non-existent in this game as well. Especially when it came to their shooting. All these guys coming off the bench, whether it be Strus, whether it be Merrill, whether it be Schroeder, you're expecting them to light it up from 3 as well. And they were not able to. You look at Merrill himself, he did not make a single 3-pointer in 7 tries. And combined, those 3 specifically coming off the bench, all combined for 13 points and 1 of 12 shooting from 3. All of them combined for that total output. And those would be the guys typically to provide them with sparks in that department off the bench. And they just were not able to deliver. That can be the tough reality of things sometimes, right? Like, the way that works, the way that energy in the ball constantly moves and shifts around, sometimes you're going to have nights where the shots aren't falling. And this might have been one of those nights for Cleveland. Maybe they do get right in that respect at home, in front of their own home crowd, with that advantage. That's possible. But even if that goes right, something else seemingly with this Cavs team is just bound to go wrong in this matchup. And it's proven to be the case in the first 2 games. So they have themselves a lot of work to do. And it truly does not get easier, even with them being at home, by already putting yourselves in this kind of hole against this good of a Knicks team as they have been in their last, essentially, going back to Game 6, the last 7 games of their playoff run. They've just been as dominant as you could ask. Well, yeah, especially in the last 7 games. Because, again, they got the 2 consecutive wins, but you also have to consider the 51-point lead that they had by the end of Game 6. The 29-point advantage they had in Game 5. So, again, they've been riding that kind of territory for a while now. And you have still gotten glimpses of that with them putting together their largest unanswered run in postseason history. Something that probably broke one of the many unanswered runs they had in that same Game 6 against Atlanta in the first round. You're entering a very dangerous territory for Cleveland. Like that is all that I can say about that. And man, they just have their work truly cut out for them. But that'll do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.